My name is Eli Carver, 34. For 5 years, I lived a lie, believing my wife, Veronica, abandoned me and my cancer at 29 because I was too expensive. That delusion crumbled the day a lawyer, Daniel Freeman, appeared at my door, not with medical bills, but with news of a $63 million inheritance. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, the woman who left me to die was fighting to prove I was mentally unfit, while her friends spread vile lies online. Eli's cancer was totally fake. He's been scamming the system. In a single, brutal week, my entire past was rewritten, my survival questioned. And there she was, my ex-wife, Veronica, laughing at a bar, her manicured hand resting on her new boyfriend's arm, completely oblivious that the man she thought she'd broken was now watching her every move. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. You came for my money. You got caught. My wife abandoned me when I was diagnosed with cancer at 29. You're too expensive to save, she said. Real classy, right? 5 years later, I'm still here, still breathing, and still paying off medical bills that could fund a small country's defense budget. I'm Eli Carver, 34 years old, former auto mechanic turned part-time Uber driver. My hands still smell like motor oil, even though I haven't worked on an engine in months. These days, I spend most of my time shuttling drunk college kids and airport runs, trying to scrape together enough money to keep the lights on in my crumbling craftsman house. The knock on my door came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of overdue bills, and wondering if ramen noodles counted as a balanced breakfast, when someone started pounding on my front door like they were trying to break it down. Mr. Carver. Mr. Elliot Carver. The voice was professional, crisp. Not a bill collector, then. They usually just left threatening notes. I opened the door to find a tall man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. He looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm advertisement, all polished shoes and perfect haircut. I'm Daniel Freeman, attorney with Freeman and Associates. I need to speak with you about an inheritance. I almost laughed. I think you've got the wrong guy. Nobody in my family has 2 nickels to rub together. Are you Elliot James Carver, married to Veronica Lynn Carver, diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma in 2019? My blood went cold. How do you know about my medical history? May I come in? This is rather complicated. I led him to my living room, which consisted of a sagging couch I'd bought at a garage sale and a coffee table held together with duct tape. Freeman didn't seem fazed by the surroundings. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Carver, you've been named as the beneficiary of a substantial inheritance. $63 million to be exact. I stared at him. That's not possible. The donor was Dr. Marcus Chen, a medical researcher who specialized in cancer treatment. He died 6 months ago and left specific instructions that his estate should go to someone who survived cancer without family support. Your case came to his attention through medical records. My head was spinning. $63 million. It was more money than I could comprehend. Why me? Dr. Chen's notes indicate he was impressed by your survival rate despite having no support system. He wanted his money to go to someone who understood what it meant to fight alone. Freeman pulled out a photograph and slid it across my coffee table. However, there's been some complications. Your estranged wife and her boyfriend have been contesting the inheritance, claiming you're mentally unfit to handle such a sum. The photograph showed Veronica and some guy I didn't recognize sitting in what looked like a lawyer's office. She looked exactly the same as when she'd walked out on me. Perfect blonde hair, designer clothes, that cold smile that used to make my stomach flip. Now it just made me angry. Who's the guy? Derek Ames. He works in pharmaceutical sales. Apparently, he's been advising your wife on how to challenge the inheritance. I studied the photo more carefully. Derek looked like every pharmaceutical sales rep I'd ever met. Artificially white teeth, gym-built physique, expensive watch. The kind of guy who probably called everyone buddy and drove a BMW with vanity plates. What kind of challenge? Freeman's expression darkened. They're claiming the cancer affected your judgment. That you're not capable of managing money responsibly. They've filed paperwork requesting a competency hearing. Can they do that? They can try. But Mr. Carver, there's something else you should know. Freeman pulled out his phone and showed me a social media post. This went live an hour ago. The post was from someone named Tiffany, and it showed a photo of me from 5 years ago when I was in the middle of chemotherapy. I looked skeletal, bald, barely alive. The caption read, "Eli's cancer was totally fake. He's been scamming the system for years. #cancer fraud, #exposed." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. That's not true. I know, but it has over 10,000 shares already. Your wife's friend appears to be quite influential on social media. I handed the phone back, my hands shaking with rage. So, let me get this straight. I survived cancer. My wife abandons me, and now she's trying to steal money that was left to me while her friends spread lies about my illness online. That's an accurate summary. Yes. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the street where I lived alone for 5 years. The same street where neighbors had stopped talking to me after Veronica left. Like divorce was contagious. The same street where I'd come home after chemotherapy sessions to an empty house because my wife couldn't be bothered to drive me to treatments. Mr. Freeman, what do I need to do to fight this? First, we need to document your current mental state. I'll arrange for a psychological evaluation. Second, we need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Your wife and her boyfriend seem determined to paint you as unstable. I turned back to face him. How ugly? Social media campaigns, character assassination, probably attempts to dig up anything they can use against you. People get vicious when this much money is involved. I thought about Veronica's face in that photograph. The calculating look in her eyes, the same look she'd had when she told me she was leaving. You don't understand, Mr. Freeman. It's already ugly. It's been ugly for 5 years. Freeman packed up his briefcase. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. In the meantime, I'd suggest staying off social media and avoiding contact with your wife or her associates. After he left, I sat on my couch staring at the business card he'd given me. $63 million. It was enough money to never worry about anything again. Enough to pay off every medical bill, buy a new house, maybe even take a vacation. But first, I had to deal with Veronica. The Pine Knot was the kind of bar where everyone knew your business before you walked through the door. It sat on the corner of Main and 3rd Street, a squat brick building with neon beer signs in the windows and a parking lot full of pickup trucks and motorcycles. I'd been going there since I turned 21, back when Veronica and I were still happy, and she'd sometimes meet me there after work. Now it was just my refuge, a place where I could nurse a beer and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. I pushed through the heavy wooden door and immediately spotted them in the corner booth. Veronica and Derek sitting close together, her manicured hand resting on his forearm. She was laughing at something he'd said. That fake tinkle of a laugh she used when she wanted something. The bartender, a guy named Tommy, who'd known me for years, caught my eye and nodded toward the couple. They've been here for an hour, he said quietly, talking about you. What kind of talk? The kind you probably don't want to hear. I ordered a beer and tried to ignore them, but their voices carried across the mostly empty bar. Derek had one of those loud, obnoxious voices that demanded attention. The guy's obviously not stable, he was saying. I mean, look at where he lives. Look at what he does for work. You can't trust someone like that with $60 million. $63 million, Veronica corrected. And you're right. Eli never was good with money. Even before the cancer, he could barely manage his own checking account. I gripped my beer bottle so hard I thought it might shatter. She was rewriting history, making me sound like some kind of financial disaster. I'd managed our household budget for 8 years of marriage. I'd been the one who made sure the bills got paid, who balanced the checkbook, who planned for the future. The cancer thing is perfect though, Derek continued. We can claim it affected his brain function. Chio brain they call it. Makes people forgetful, confused. A judge would have to question whether he's competent. Tiffany's post is already going viral. Veronica said, by tomorrow, half the town will think he faked the whole thing. That's when I snapped. I stood up, walked over to their booth, and slid into the seat across from them. Hello, Veronica. She looked up, startled. For just a second, I saw something that might have been guilt across her face. Then her expression hardened into the cold mask I remembered from our last fight. Eli, what are you doing here? Having a drink in my regular bar. The question is, what are you doing here? Derek leaned forward, puffing out his chest like some kind of territorial animal. We're having a private conversation, buddy. Why don't you find somewhere else to drink? I looked at him carefully. Up close, he was exactly what I'd expected. Spray tan, perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month. The kind of guy who'd never had a real problem in his life. Actually, Derek, it is Derek, right? I think we should talk. All three of us. There's nothing to discuss. Veronica said, you'll get your competency hearing and then we'll see what a judge thinks about your ability to handle money. Funny thing about that, I said, taking a sip of my beer. I've been doing some research on you, Derek. Pharmaceutical sales, right? That's interesting work. Good money, I bet. Derek's confident expression flickered. What's your point? No point. Just curious about the man who's been giving my wife legal advice. Tell me, how's your credit score these days? The color drained from Derek's face. Veronica looked between us, confused. I don't know what you're talking about, Derek said. Sure you do. See, the thing about driving Uber is you meet all kinds of people, including a guy named Steve, who works at First National Bank. Steve's got some interesting stories about local pharmaceutical sales reps who've been having trouble with their car payments. Derek stood up abruptly. Come on, Veronica. We don't have to listen to this. But Veronica was staring at him with a new expression. Derek, what's he talking about? Nothing. He's just trying to cause trouble. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app I'd been running since I sat down. Actually, I think the trouble started about 5 minutes ago when you two were discussing my chemo brain and planning to defraud me out of an inheritance. You can't record us without permission. Derek sputtered. Actually, in this state, I only need one party's consent for audio recording. That would be me. I looked at Veronica. Did you know your boyfriend here owes $40,000 on a BMW? He can't afford or that his company's been garnishing his wages for the past 6 months. Veronica's face went white. Is that true? Veronica, don't listen to him. He's obviously desperate. The desperate one is you, Derek, which explains why you're so interested in my inheritance. I stood up and dropped a $10 bill on the table. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your competency challenge and you're going to tell your friend Tiffany to delete that post about me faking cancer. Or what? Veronica demanded. I smiled at her, the same cold smile she'd given me the day she left. Or I'm going to make both of your lives very uncomfortable. You see, I've learned a lot about fighting dirty in the past 5 years. Cancer didn't end me, but it definitely taught me how to survive. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Veronica, next time you want to have a private conversation about destroying your ex-husband, maybe don't do it in his favorite bar. As I headed for the door, I could hear them starting to argue behind me. Derek's voice was getting higher and more panicked. while Veronica's was getting colder and more controlled. It was the sound of a partnership beginning to crack under pressure. Tommy caught my arm as I passed the bar. "That was something," he said quietly. "That was just the beginning." The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most of them were from numbers I didn't recognize, but a few were from people I used to consider friends. The first text I opened was from my old friend Jake. "Dude, what the heck? Tiffany saying you faked cancer. That's messed up." The second was from my cousin Marty. "Saw the post. Want me to pay this Tiffany chick a visit?" The third was from my former coworker Paul. "Always knew something was off about your whole cancer story. Too convenient." I deleted the messages without responding and drove to Freeman's office. He was waiting for me with a stack of newspapers and a laptop computer. "It's gotten worse," he said without preamble. "The story's been picked up by 3 local news outlets and 2 cancer advocacy groups are demanding an investigation into your medical records." Can they do that? Not legally, no. But they can make enough noise to influence public opinion, which could affect a judge's decision on the competency hearing. Freeman showed me the laptop screen. Tiffany's original post had been shared over 50,000 times. The comments section was a mix of outrage and support, with most people taking sides based on no information whatsoever. "We need to fight back," Freeman said, "but carefully. If we look like we're overreacting, it'll just fuel more speculation. What do you suggest?" "First, we document everything. I want copies of all your medical records, testimony from your doctors, proof of treatment. Second, we investigate them. If they're going to play dirty, we need to be prepared to do the same." I thought about Derek's panicked expression when I'd mentioned his financial problems. I might already have a head start on that. Freeman raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Derek Ames isn't exactly the successful businessman he pretends to be, and I have a feeling there's more where that came from." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to drive around town, listen to people talk, and learn things they don't want me to know. The beauty of being an Uber driver is that people treat you like you're invisible. They get in your car and immediately start talking on their phones or having conversations like you're not even there. In the past 5 years, I'd learned more secrets about my town than a priest or a therapist. That afternoon, I got a ride request from downtown. The pickup address was familiar. It was the building where Derek worked. When I pulled up, he was standing on the sidewalk talking animatedly on his phone. "No, no, no," he was saying as he got into my back seat. "You don't understand. This could be big money. Life-changing money." He gave me an address in the wealthy part of town and immediately went back to his phone call. I adjusted my rearview mirror so I could see his face and started driving. "Look, I know what we agreed," Derek continued. "But circumstances have changed. This inheritance thing is real, and if we play it right, we could both come out ahead." I drove slowly, taking the longest route possible to his destination. "She doesn't suspect anything, does she?" Derek asked whoever was on the other end. "Good, because if this works, we'll have enough money to disappear. Start over somewhere else." My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to steal my inheritance. They were planning to run away with it. "The competency hearing is scheduled for next week," Derek said. "Her lawyer thinks we have a good shot, especially with all the social media attention. People are already convinced the guy's a fraud." I pulled into the driveway of an expensive-looking house, and Derek ended his call. As he got out of the car, I got a good look at the address. It was important to know where my enemies lived. "Thanks for the ride," Derek said, not even looking at me. "No problem," I replied. "Have a great day." As soon as he was inside the house, I called Freeman. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "I need you to find out who Derek Ames has been talking to about the inheritance case. And I need to know everything about a woman named Tiffany who's been spreading lies about me online. What did you find out? They're not just trying to take my money. They're planning to disappear with it. Freeman was quiet for a moment. Eli, I have to ask, are you planning to do something illegal? No, but I am planning to do something effective. That evening, I drove to Veronica's townhouse. It was in one of those new developments where all the houses looked exactly the same with perfect lawns and two-car garages, very different from the neighborhood where we'd lived together with its old trees and character. I parked across the street and waited. At 8:30, Derek's BMW pulled into the driveway. At 9:15, a white Mercedes arrived. The driver was a young woman with platinum blonde hair and designer clothes. Tiffany, I assumed. I watched them through the large front windows as they sat around Veronica's dining room table with papers spread out in front of them. They were planning something and I had a pretty good idea what it was. My phone buzzed with a text from Freeman. Found Tiffany's full name. Tiffany Walsh, 31, works as a social media influencer. Has 200K followers on Instagram. Also found something interesting about Derek. He's been married twice. Both ended in messy divorces involving financial disputes. I texted back, what kind of financial disputes? The kind where he was accused of hiding assets and manipulating his wives into signing over property, never convicted. But the pattern is clear. I stared at Veronica's house, watching my ex-wife laugh and gesture as she talked with her conspirators. She had no idea what kind of man she'd gotten involved with. Or maybe she did and she just didn't care as long as she got what she wanted. Either way, she was about to learn that I wasn't the same broken man who'd let her walk away 5 years ago. Cancer had taught me how to fight for my life. Now I was going to fight for everything else. The competency hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at the county courthouse. Freeman had prepared me for what to expect. Questions about my mental state, my financial history, my ability to make sound decisions. What he hadn't prepared me for was the circus waiting outside. Tiffany had organized a protest. About 30 people were standing on the courthouse steps holding signs that read "Cancer Fraud and Justice for Real Survivors." Local news crews were interviewing anyone willing to talk, and several cancer support groups had sent representatives to monitor the proceedings. "This is insane," I muttered as Freeman and I pushed through the crowd. "It's theater," Freeman replied. "Don't let it rattle you." Inside the courtroom, Veronica and Derek were sitting with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. Veronica had dressed conservatively for the occasion. Navy blue dress, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a professional style. She looked like the grieving ex-wife of a troubled man. Derek, on the other hand, looked nervous. He kept checking his phone and whispering urgently to their lawyer. Judge Patricia Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who'd been on the bench for 20 years. She called the hearing to order and asked Veronica's lawyer to present their case. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "we're here today because we have serious concerns about Mr. Carver's mental fitness to handle a substantial inheritance. The evidence shows a pattern of erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and possible fraud related to his claimed cancer diagnosis." For the next hour, they presented their case. They brought in a psychiatrist who'd never met me, but was willing to testify that chemotherapy could cause long-term cognitive impairment. They showed the judge printouts of Tiffany's social media posts and the thousands of comments from people who believed I was a fraud. Derek took the stand and painted a picture of me as an unstable, potentially dangerous man who'd threatened him and Veronica at the Pine Knot. He seemed paranoid, Derek testified, talking about recording conversations, making vague threats. It was honestly frightening. When it was our turn, Freeman methodically destroyed their arguments. He presented my complete medical records, including pathology reports, treatment schedules, and follow-up care documentation. He brought in Dr. Sarah Martinez, the oncologist who treated me, to testify about the reality of my diagnosis and treatment. Mr. Carver had stage 3 lymphoma. Dr. Martinez testified. His treatment included 6 months of intensive chemotherapy followed by radiation therapy. I have photographs of his treatment sessions if the court would like to see them. Freeman also presented evidence of Derek's financial problems and his history of manipulating women for money. Your Honor, Freeman said, this isn't about Mr. Carver's competency. This is about greed. Mr. Ames has a documented history of targeting vulnerable women and manipulating them into questionable financial decisions. Mrs. Carver is simply his latest victim. Veronica's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. I could see doubt creeping into the judge's expression. Then Freeman played his ace. He presented the audio recording I'd made at the Pine Knot where Derek and Veronica discussed my chemo brain and their plan to challenge the inheritance. This recording clearly shows that the petitioners are not acting out of concern for Mr. Carver's well-being, Freeman argued. They're acting out of greed and spite. Judge Morrison listened to the entire recording with a deepening frown. When it finished, she looked at Veronica and Derek with obvious disgust. Mrs. Carver, the judge said, do you have anything to say about this recording? Veronica stood up, her composure finally cracking. Your Honor, my ex-husband has been stalking and harassing us. He's clearly unstable. The fact that he secretly recorded us proves it. Actually, Judge Morrison replied, the fact that he recorded you proves he was being prudent. The recording is legal under state law, and it clearly shows that your concerns about his mental state are fabricated. The judge ruled in my favor, dismissing the competency challenge and ordering Veronica to pay my legal fees. As the gavel came down, I felt a surge of vindication that was almost overwhelming. But as we left the courthouse, I realized the victory felt hollow. Yes, I had won the legal battle, but the damage to my reputation was already done. Half the town still thought I was a fraud, and the other half thought I was crazy. Outside, the protesters had grown larger. Tiffany was giving an interview to a local news crew, claiming the judge had been bought off and promising to continue her investigation into my background. This isn't over, Veronica said as she passed me on the courthouse steps. People know what you really are now. You're right, I replied. This isn't over. But you have no idea what I really am. That night, I sat in my living room with a bottle of beer and thought about everything that had happened. I'd won the inheritance, but I'd lost something else in the process. My privacy, my reputation, maybe even my sense of who I was. For 5 years, I'd been the victim. The abandoned husband, the cancer survivor, the guy everyone felt sorry for. Now I was something else. The rich man everyone resented. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop being the victim and start being something else entirely. I picked up my phone and called Freeman. I want to discuss strategy, I said. Strategy for what? For making sure this really is over. The inheritance money hit my account on a Monday morning in November. $63 million minus taxes and legal fees. But still more money than I'd ever imagined having. I stared at the bank balance on my phone screen for a full 5 minutes, trying to make it feel real. My first instinct was to pay off every debt I owed. The medical bills, the mortgage, the credit cards I'd maxed out trying to survive. But Freeman had advised me to wait, to think strategically about how I used the money. Once you start spending, he'd said, people will be watching every move you make. Make sure your first moves are the right ones. I spent the week researching Veronica, Derek, and Tiffany. It's amazing what you can learn about people when you have unlimited resources and a good private investigator. Derek Ames wasn't just broke. He was drowning in debt. The BMW was 3 payments behind. His credit cards were maxed out, and his ex-wives were both pursuing him for unpaid alimony. He'd been borrowing money from his pharmaceutical company's petty cash fund, probably planning to pay it back when he got his hands on my inheritance. Tiffany Walsh was equally interesting. Her social media influence was built on a foundation of lies, fake followers, bought engagement, sponsored posts for products that didn't exist. She was being investigated by the Federal Trade Commission for fraud, and several companies were suing her for breach of contract. But Veronica was the most interesting of all. My ex-wife, it turned out, had been having an affair with her boss, Jake Morrison, for over a year. She was also skimming money from her company's marketing budget, using it to fund her lifestyle while she waited for Derek's get-rich-quick schemes to pay off. Armed with this information, I began my campaign. First, I dealt with Derek. I bought his debt. All of it. The car loan, the credit cards, the money he owed his ex-wives. When you have $60 million, you can buy almost anything, including the right to collect on someone else's debts. On Wednesday morning, Derek woke up to find his BMW being repossessed. Not by the bank, but by a company I'd hired. They were very professional about it and very public. Half his neighborhood came out to watch as they loaded his precious car onto a flatbed truck. That afternoon, Derek received a certified letter informing him that all his debts had been consolidated and were now owned by Carver Holdings LLC. He had 30 days to pay in full or face legal action. Derek called me that evening, his voice shaking with rage and panic. "What the heck do you think you're doing?" "I'm collecting on legally purchased debt," I replied calmly. "Nothing illegal about it. You can't do this." "Actually, I can. I have excellent lawyers who've made sure everything is completely legal." "You owe me $230,000, Derek. When can I expect payment?" The line went quiet for a long moment. "You know, I don't have that kind of money." "Then I guess you should have thought about that before you tried to steal mine." Next, I turned my attention to Tiffany. I hired a team of social media experts to document every fake follower, every fraudulent post, every violation of FTC guidelines they could find. Then I compiled it all into a comprehensive report and sent it to every company she'd ever worked with, every platform she'd ever used, and every government agency that might be interested. Within a week, Tiffany's Instagram account was suspended, her YouTube channel was demonetized, and she was facing federal charges for wire fraud. Her carefully constructed online empire collapsed like a house of cards. But Veronica required a more personal touch. I started by buying the company where she worked. It was a small marketing firm with about 30 employees, and the owner was looking to retire. I paid twice what it was worth and became Veronica's new boss overnight. I didn't fire her immediately. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, I made her life systematically miserable. I moved her office to the basement. I assigned her the most boring, tedious projects I could find. I hired an efficiency expert to monitor her work and report every mistake, every late arrival, every long lunch. Most importantly, I made sure she knew that I knew about her affair with Jake Morrison and her embezzlement from the marketing budget. "We need to talk," I said, calling her into my new office on her first day under my ownership. Veronica sat across from my desk, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. She'd lost weight since the courthouse hearing, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "This is harassment," she said. "This is business. You're an employee of my company now, and I expect you to follow company policies. That includes not stealing from the marketing budget and not having affairs with married clients." Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." I slid a folder across the desk. "Bank records, hotel receipts, email correspondence." "Should I continue?" Veronica opened the folder and flipped through the documents. Her hands were shaking. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone who's supposed to care about you." "Eli, please. I know I hurt you, but nothing. You left me to die alone and then you tried to steal money that was meant to help cancer survivors. You made my life heck and now I'm returning the favor." Veronica started crying, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught. "I'll quit," she said. "No, you won't. You'll stay and you'll do your job and you'll think about what you've done every single day. Because if you quit, I'll make sure everyone in town knows about your affair and your embezzlement. Jake Morrison will lose his job, his wife will divorce him, and you'll never work in marketing again." She left my office without another word. The final piece of my revenge came together a month later. Derek, facing bankruptcy and potential criminal charges, had become desperate. He'd started selling everything he owned, including information about Veronica's criminal activities. I used that information to have Veronica arrested for embezzlement. The amount she'd stolen wasn't huge, about $15,000 over 2 years, but it was enough for felony charges. The arrest made the local news. The same reporters who'd covered Tiffany's cancer fraud allegations were now covering Veronica's very real financial crimes. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek tried to flee town, but my private investigators were watching him. They tipped off the police about his location and he was arrested at a bus station 3 counties away. Tiffany, facing federal charges and complete financial ruin, posted a public apology on what was left of her social media presence. She admitted that her cancer fraud allegations had been false and asked for forgiveness from the cancer community. 6 months after the inheritance hearing, all 3 of my tormentors were facing criminal charges. Derek and Veronica were looking at prison time, and Tiffany was facing federal prosecution. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. The money hadn't made me happy. The revenge hadn't healed the wounds they'd inflicted. I was rich, but I was still alone. I was powerful, but I was still angry. One evening, I was sitting in my old house. I'd never moved despite being able to afford anything I wanted. When Freeman called. "It's over," he said. Derek took a plea deal. 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. Veronica's trial starts next month, but her lawyer thinks she'll take a deal, too. 2 to 3 years, probably. And Tiffany, federal prosecutors are offering her probation if she cooperates with their investigation into social media fraud. She'll have to pay back everything she stole, but she'll avoid prison. I hung up the phone and looked around my living room. Nothing had changed. Same sagging couch, same duct-taped coffee table, same stack of bills on the kitchen counter. Though now I could afford to pay them. The revenge was complete, but it hadn't brought me peace. It had just made me into something I wasn't sure I wanted to be. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the street where I'd lived for 15 years. The same street where neighbors had avoided me after Veronica left, where I'd struggled alone through cancer treatment, where I'd rebuilt my life from nothing. Tomorrow, I decided I would start over. I would use the money for something good, something that honored Dr. Chen's intentions. I would help other cancer patients who were fighting alone the way I had fought. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel satisfied. My enemies had been defeated. Justice had been served. And I had proven that sometimes the victim can become the victor. The cancer hadn't ended me. The abandonment hadn't broken me. And in the end, I had won.